before we get into all that, let me just introduce myself. So, as mentioned, my name is Cillian. I'm a director in consulting in Deliotte, and what we do in Deliotte is obviously management consultancy, audit, accountancy, and tax. But actually, we're going through a huge change internally, and that change is effectively how do we now help our clients cope in this new digital world, this new environment and paradigm that is being created through exponential technologies, through workflow automation, through automation, digital design, and all those different things. And indeed, I suppose one of the things that's different about the firm that I would maybe question some of the other firms in our space on is that we really try to approach things on the basis of we eat our own cooking, and we try to show, not tell people what we're doing. And I think it's testament that you saw the Edge, which is our offices in Amsterdam, which is a fantastic building. I've been there many times. They have an innovation hub there, and we do a lot of work out of that. So what do we do? So in the blockchain lab, we do everything from what we call ideation through to deployment of blockchain technologies. So ideation is literally taking ideas from industry, so something like the construction industry, and saying, right, what are your pain points? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And usually that's kind of one of 3 or 4 things. The first thing is you're trying to get a quicker response. So what is it you're trying to do? Where is it you're trying to get to? Who are you trying to give information or data to? And on the other side, it's looking to service the customer. And that customer can be an internal customer, in a B2B setting. It could be a B2C setting where it's an actual outside customer. And what we would say is that people now want 3 things. They want things faster, they want them perfectly, and they want them now. And a lot of the time they want them free as well, particularly millennials. And that's why we're seeing a lot of this freemium model now come in, where you get software or basic software for free, and then they charge you for uplifts in capability. But we do everything from the ideas through to the deployments of blockchain. So the first ever commercial deployment of a blockchain in a private setting was by an organization called DNVGL. DNVGL, some of you may have heard of. They do the certification and the, I suppose, the assurance and the audit on fixed infrastructure, primarily in the marine, oil and gas industry. So if you build a big offshore pipeline, if you build fishing trawlers, that sort of capability, these guys go in, they are the auditors, they sign it off, and they give you a certificate. What does that certificate do for them? Well, one, it's a point around safety. So, if you're a trawler, you can go in and out of a harbour or something like that. But on the other side, it's for insurance. And they had huge issues in terms of people ringing up. Is the cert still valid? Does this still exist? Is it still in good proof or in good condition? And the issue here a lot of the time was they were being faked. So they started getting intelligence, so they started putting barcodes on them and then holograms on them and all that type of stuff. And now it's got to, they've put those onto the blockchain. And what the blockchain is actually doing is it's now providing them with an environment or an ecosystem that they connect to other nodes to integrate with. So for example, now they can connect that blockchain and a certificate to insurance companies who are on that blockchain, and now they can start creating a market for insurance as those certificates are added. So for example, you might see a new trawler, the insurance companies can see that this new trawler is added, and if the trawlerman wants to share his details, they can go in and they can offer a quote on the basis that it has now been supplied by DNVGL. We do eminence, so research, platform analysis, and content. One of the key points there is we're agnostic to the blockchain. There are about 8, 9 big players now in the blockchain world. We're agnostic. We don't go with a particular one. We work on all of them. We can code on all of them, but we just say, we'll pick the best for you on the basis of what we do. We do education, so events like this, labs, events, taking our customers in and educating them on blockchain technology. Capability building, so that's the core function of the team. We go from ideation through to the delivery, and we are the EMEA Centre of Excellence for that. So we service everything between here, Dubai, down as far as Cape Town and back again in that kind of triangle. But at the same time, we set up the lab in APAC. We sent someone over there for a year to help them get that up and running. And we also set up the lab in New York. So we were the first stood up in the world, and we opened our doors as a lab in 2015, so quite a while ago in terms of blockchain itself. We have 3 hub labs, 20 spoke labs. I'm not going to go through this. The key point is that we build blockchains. So what is it? So you've probably heard the word a lot today. How many of you would have never heard of the word before coming to the event, just out of interest? Nobody, so everybody's heard about it. 2 years ago when I came to events, people didn't even know what blockchain was. But now I think it's testament to what's happening in industry that people at least know about it now. How many of you could describe it? If I asked you to come up and present. Hands, show of hands. How many could? Could? Okay, so quite a few, which is good. So what is it? Effectively, it's an extension of the internet. That's, in my opinion, the most basic understanding of it. It's an extension of the internet which allows you to exchange both information, which the internet does today, but also to extend it to value. And how does it do it to extend value? It does it by creating a network of computers on nodes and by sharing and replicating the ledger between them. So today, you might have CISC and some of the subcontractors and steel suppliers or whoever it is all around that network. They're all using different balance sheets, different ledgers. CISC will have its, the steel provider will have its. So what you have to have in between? Trusted agents, middlemen, banks. So CISC are paying for the steel, or vice versa, whatever it is. You've got to use that centralized facility to manage it, to manage the trust element. And that's effectively what the blockchain does. It tries to eradicate that. And it tries to eradicate it, but it doesn't try, it does eradicate it by effectively creating this network of computers which is sharing, replicating the ledger so the transactions can happen across each of them. Now the first piece is that it's a network of computers that allows you to exchange value. So value is the piece we talked about in terms of that can be economic value, but also you can actually exchange an identity or anything on that blockchain. So you can tokenize anything to represent it or to be represented on the blockchain. So for example, the clicker here. I could write that into a transaction as a blockchain, create a token for it and say, this CUE clicker is an ERC20 token or an ERC217 token, and it represents clicker coin or something like that. And I can do that. I could do that today. But you can tokenize anything. You could tokenize a piece of steel, a brick, a block, you name it. And also you can store data. It is a database technology. That's its foundation, that's its core. So you can do all those things. So how does it work? Let's go to the next slide. So how it works is, the first block in a blockchain is called the Genesis block. So that's where you write in the initial transactions into a blockchain. So for example, the clicker, okay? So the clicker is belonging to Avcom. Okay, so we'll write into a transaction, first block, clicker Avcom, Cillian 10 euros, into that block. How do we know it's valid? We know it's valid because we have what's called the tick at the bottom, which is a consensus mechanism. And the consensus mechanism is what tells us this transaction was valid. And there's a couple of ways of that consensus working, and we'll come on to that in a second. Block 2. I decide to give the Avcom lads a $5 for the clicker, buy it off them. The block will read Avcom, €5, Cillian, €5, because I had 10, so now I have 5, Cillian clicker. And you'll go through that through the chronological order of transactions over time, just building up the information. So the data and the transactions goes into the blocks, you build a chain with those, and that's the blockchain. And you can always have a previous reference to the former block. So block 2 will represent the Genesis block, 3, 2, and back and back and back. So if you were in block 55, you could still look up that transaction where I transacted with Avcom, they got a $5, I got the clicker, and the value moved across that. Okay? When consensus executes for each block, the data is written into it. When it's written in, it is completely immutable. So in a database technology today, if I write in clicker equals Cillian, someone can go in, scripting, write in something to erase the lines of data, it's gone. You don't know where it is. Now you might have backups and stuff like that, but effectively it can be gone. So as I say, it's a blockchain, so it's just a chain of blocks of data and transactions. It's chronologically ordered. It's time-stamped, so all the transactions will be time-stamped. It goes through this consensus mechanism, we'll come on to that in a moment, and it always has a reference to the previous block. The point that's not on the slide is these can be private or public. So you can have a big public blockchain, Bitcoin is the best example, Ethereum is probably the second best example, or you can have a private one. So for example, the construction industry in Ireland, could you all clumb together and create a construction blockchain? Yes. Could you keep that private among yourselves? Yes. Do you have to show each other the data that you don't want each other to see on that blockchain? No, you don't. You can hide it. You can encrypt it. You can have cryptography over it. Okay? So that's it from left to right. Does that make sense to everyone? Or any questions at that stage? No? Okay. So let's go on. So then that's just adding a new block. So consensus. Consensus is what this relies on, okay? So you have to be able to agree that exactly what happened in the block happened. On the left-hand side, we have the two types of consensus which are primarily used in the public blockchains. So the most common used is what's called proof of work. Proof of work is this big mathematical maths test, right? In the Bitcoin world, runs every 10 minutes. If you win, if you get the maths question right first, you get 12.5 Bitcoins today. That's about $80,000. This runs every 10 minutes. So in an hour you could make 6 8s, 48. You could make nearly $500,000 in an hour if you could win it. To have any chance, you probably need a room about this big, running hardware, running kit. It's hugely energy intensive. So for that reason, most of the Bitcoin mining, this is what they call mining, this proof of work, is done in northwestern China, where they've got access to big hydroelectric dams, a lot of free electricity coming through them. Not free, but very cheap. Because it's so inefficient, the proof of stake is being introduced in some blockchains. It won't be introduced in Bitcoin, but it will be introduced in other blockchains. And this is like a financial reward system. You put in money, you put in this deposit, you execute transactions, you get rewarded for that. But if they find out you're cheating the system, you're gone and all your money's going to be taken back off you. So that's kind of this proof of stake. Just to give an example of how effective and efficient this is, the Bitcoin blockchain was launched after Satoshi Nakamoto wrote his paper back in around 2008. When it was launched to today, there's been thousands of blocks put into the database or into the blockchain. It hasn't been hacked once. The wallet providers have been hacked. It is under constant attack. We did a study recently where we heard that if you wanted to try and overtake the Bitcoin blockchain at any time and overpower the consensus mechanism, you'd need all the energy consumed by Norway at your fingertips in 10 minutes to have any chance of even coming close. But if you did win it, you'd make a lot of money. There's 21 million Bitcoins, multiply that by 6,000, it's a hell of a lot of money. On the right-hand side is what we would use in a private blockchain. These are some of them. There are a lot more examples of the consensus mechanisms for a private blockchain or a permissioned blockchain. It's like a private club. So let's just say we were to do it in the construction industry here in Ireland. We could have proof of authority. So this is round-robin validation of the blocks. So the clicker, for example, let's just say we set one up here in the room. So I'm giving these lads a fiver, they're giving me the clicker. Proof of authority. If Alexandra says it's true, that transaction is valid, that's it. She's the proof of authority. How do we keep Alexandra honest? We move it for the next block, the consensus mechanism, to somebody else. And there's that constant loop. The other option is we go with practical Byzantine fault tolerance, the rule of 2/3. If 2/3 of all the people in our permission blockchain, all of us around in the club here, agree that the transaction took place, I gave the lads a fiver and they gave me the clicker, that's it. It's written into the blockchain. Now it's immutable. Okay? So that's consensus. So that's what it all kind of resides on. So what can you do with blockchain? So the first one is you can store data on it. It is by no means the most efficient database in the world. Not by a long shot, it ain't. If you want Oracle, SQL, whatever, go that route if you just need big, comprehensive databases. That said, some companies are starting to align data storage to the blockchain. Big ChainDB, for example, you can store stuff alongside. IPFS is the interplanetary file sharing system. It's very clever, so I'm just going to rub this for a second. Sheet of paper. What will IPFS do? It'll share the piece of paper across the network and store it on the network. How does it do it? It shards it. It's like a pane of glass. Think about this as a pane of glass. I break it with a hammer, bang. All those pieces. What it does is it'll send all the different pieces to different parts of the network, and then the person with the public key and the private key, they can put the document back together. They can pull it back in. But the document itself is effectively stored all over the place. It's not in any one single place. So you can store data there. Second thing is the value transfer. So this is, how Bitcoin originated and how the blockchain was originally built. But going back to the digital Britain presentation, Bitcoin is really only an app on the iOS structure, and iOS is the blockchain, if that makes sense. So you have currency ownership. You have a fully immutable audit trail, and it's automated. So you can have what's called a smart contract, something we would have seen earlier on. A smart contract, there are two types really of smart contract. One is if-then statements, so it's like a rules engine. If this happens, do that. So for example, if the N7, M7 new piece of the motorway is delivered under 100 days, give SIAC an extra 5 million. If it's delivered after an additional 10 days of the stated time, make them pay a penalty of 5 million, for example. So that could be a smart contract, for example. The other thing you can do is actually you can have smart contracts which are pretty much legally binding or looking to get to legally binding status. So a lot of the law firms in the UK, they're setting up smart contract divisions. I think Clifford Chance, one of the big law firms over there, this year they've employed 60 graduates working in the technology space to be able to start coding. Now some people in this country are looking at it for conveyancing. So a new development, very easy, there's very known title, clear known title and structure of the units. Could you use that if it was connected, to example, to the distributed nodes in the network, like the land registry, the financiers, etc. Okay. So what about construction? And forgive me, I am nowhere near the construction industry myself. The closest I came was probably buying a house. You'll know by my hands I'm not in the industry. But what we have done is we've looked at use cases. So Rob Fox yesterday was here. I know he was presenting on Site Passport. This is something very similar. This is called EduScript. We developed this for Bank of Ireland, and what it is effectively a platform whereby we can take awards and credits from a university or from an education institution or from a safety institution and give that person the recognition on the blockchain that they have it. So for example, today you might have a lad with a pass on the side of his shoulder or something like that. In the future it could literally be in his pocket, on his phone. The pass is valid, he clicks in, some sort of barcode technology, it reads the blockchain and says, yeah, it's legit, and this is where it came from. This is when he updated it, this is when he did his training, all the information that goes with it. We built this, as I say, for Bank of Ireland. They have continual professional development within the bank. So for example, if certain functions in the bank, you have to have certain levels of qualification. So for example, if you're on credit, selling mortgages, selling car finance, you have to have a certain level of education to be able to do that. So what they're looking at there is, well, can we use the blockchain to actually help manage the workflow in that process? The other thing that happens in the banking world is that because of the relationship with the union and the banking workers, as you go up your certain flights of education, so from a level 1 credit analyst to a level 5 credit manager, you get certain stipends in your salary and you also get bonuses. It's a really nasty process today in the bank. You walk in, you say, I've just completed my level 5 exams. It should be something really, to be rewarded and recognised within the bank. And to be fair, they do try to do that. But then you got to bring in your certs, you got to bring in your paper, you got to say, how long is it going to take? The bonuses end up getting paid out about 16 weeks later in the current system, whereas in the blockchain, this is a smart contract that executes. Mary's now level 5, bang, send her 500 euros. So it's easy. So that's what that does. Could you do it for site access? Even access within buildings, yes. The airport authority, one of the airport authorities from Europe, they were in with us recently, and they were looking at actually access controls for different parts of the buildings. So for example, if a contract is coming in to fix an aircon unit, airside or something like that in a certain part, you only give them the access that they can get to that and back, and that's it. Other one is know your supplier, so qualification of tenders. So the blockchain, effectively, you can look at price, source of authenticity in this secure manner. You could actually create a market. So one of the things you could do is you could say that for a construction that's going on, let's just say, I don't know, the one that was next to us, Park Plaza, up on Hatch Street, we knew for that we were going to need 10,000 blocks or whatever it was. You could tokenize the blocks and you could actually go out to market and say, right, who can supply these blocks, at what speed, at what velocity, but actually tell me everything that's happening to them. Give me the information off the blockchain as to what's happening in the production of those blocks, where the sand is coming from, where the gravel is coming from, where the cement is coming from, and putting it all together. So it's really secure and a lot more trusted. The other thing you can do is you can actually onboard your suppliers a lot better. So you could have a KYC system or a KYS system, so know your supplier. So actually they've got all the information on the blockchain already, so that when they walk into Cisks or John Paul's or whoever it is, they say, there you go lads, click on that, you'll see all my supplier information. There's all my certs, there's all my certificates, there's all the lads who work for me, there's all their site passes, there's all so on and so on and so on. So you can do that. The other thing is we can create building passports. So smart information repository for a building. We've actually done this. We've built this capability in the Netherlands, and it actually came out of the Edge, that building that we talked about earlier on, where we've looked at creating passports for buildings. So what it is it's using the secured storage and the permission sharing to get all the information from the building. So if you think about everybody working on let's just say, I don't know, Croke Park even. So I think CISCs were the contractors on this. So they would have had information. The guys supplying the ESB would have had information. The aircon guys would have had information. But that information was probably never all brought together. Whereas with the blockchain, because you're connecting all the nodes and because you're using that distribution of the workflow and the smart contracts, you can actually bring it all together, aggregate it, and you could create a building information system or management system that actually knows every single thing about every single component, right down to where these pieces of wood came from, whether it was a forest in Oslo, near Oslo or something like that, or whatever it was, but you'd have that full traceability. The other thing you can do then is you can actually start to seeing what that could look like. So this is a certificate we mocked up from the one from Amsterdam. So you have location, you have size, the legal owner, the energy performance, the fire safety, the certificate of compliance for the building, utility access, and even the people who you want to give access to the building, what areas of the building you want to give access to. So for example, audit for us is hugely independent, and we've got an obligation to keep the audit practice very independent from our consulting practice or our tax practice because of the nature of the business. We could literally restrict access to people in our buildings on the basis of the blockchain technology. So very, very powerful capabilities there. The other one is BIM and blockchain, so making a smarter system smarter. So this is where we could look at a dynamic network and literally bringing it all together. So bringing everybody within each phase of BIM to the next level through blockchain technology and putting everything together. What is blockchain really good at? Managing data. It's brilliant at it. What happens in BIM, from my understanding, and it's a very brief introduction, I can promise you, it's a lot of reconciliation of data. People checking against other people, all that sort of stuff. That's what the blockchain does. It literally eats it for breakfast. Consultants and planners, building owners, architects, systems integrators, all of those coming together on this single platform, distributed network, becoming a node or becoming at least a user on an interface to be able to access and progress pieces. The other thing, that's the last of the slide, sorry. So the other thing that I was talking to someone about the other day was the whole planning process. Planning is a huge problem in this country, and the other thing that it goes along with planning then is actually conveyancing on the other side. So you finally do manage to buy a site or buy a building or whatever it is. It's that conveyancing piece, you know, looking at land title, land registry, and they've done this in Sweden. They've put every single parcel of land in Sweden onto a blockchain, so that now if you want to go and buy a piece of a house, 123 Malmo Road, Stockholm or something like that, I'm making up the address, but you could literally go in, see the title on the blockchain. We know it's John and Mary's house. John and Mary have proven the title because it's there on the blockchain. I have the cash in my wallet, on my phone, and literally we exchange ownership, transfer of value over the blockchain in seconds rather than, I think the average conveyance in this country is about 18 to 19 weeks, something like that. Probably more in the commercial world because there's a lot more information that has to be gathered. That's it for me. I suppose it's been a whirlwind tour there of blockchain, but happy to take any questions. Sure.
Any questions for Cillian? Okay. Any practical projects going on in Deliotte in the real estate?
Practical projects in the real estate. So the one in the Netherlands.
Blockchain.
Yeah, so the one in the Netherlands for sure, that's progressing. We're also doing one with one of the ports on the mainland of Europe, and that port is actually looking at the inbound and outbound cargo and how we can actually expedite the trade finance, but also the clearing process from the port. Another one that's interesting that's going on is, at the moment in the Middle East, is around hotel rooms. So some of the big hotel groups in the Middle East, right, they have hundreds of thousands of rooms, literally. What do they want to do? They want to make their numbers. So what they say is if they can break even on the hotel rooms, they'll make huge profit by having people in the hotels. So what they're looking at is the creation of a secondary market for hotel rooms. So I might buy, I don't know, a room in Jumeirah Hotel and by the Palm Marina in Dubai or something like that for 110 euros off this new blockchain piece, knowing that as time goes on, people are going to want to buy those rooms at a higher rate the closer it gets to the time of use. So literally, I could buy them, sell them then in the secondary market, and make a dollar on them in the secondary market, with the local hotel groups happy that they're going to make their money by breaking even on the cost price of the night, plus whatever they're going to get from the guests. So really interesting models coming through. I would say that's one thing that we're seeing in blockchain is the culture and the change of how industries operate that will actually have the most impact. The other thing I'd say is that we're seeing a lot of rethinking of the value chain. So the value chain today, so for example, of bank transfers to international one, you go into your bank branch or you go onto your app, the bank does something, they talk to a bank in another country, ultimately the person hits the money hits someone else's account in the overseas destination. Completely looking at that from a different perspective. Can I transfer a coin on my phone to the account on the other side? Instantly like that. So this whole reimagination of the value chain is really changing.
We're not known for paying early though in construction, are we? You know, how would it work in a subcontract scenario? Yes.
Yeah.
Question, yes. Yes?
I just have a quick question, Trina Turner from ArcDocs. Who polices the blockchains? You know, who polices?
Or polices them.
You
so
know,
the
because
consensus mechanism
if
polices
it's a private one, it can be very easily used by criminals. Or,
Yeah.
you know, if you have this transaction that you gave the example of Mary and John in the house, and one person has bought it from them, who is seeing that legally? You know, who says that definitely happened?
So that's the setup of the consensus mechanism. So in that instance, for example, the proof of authority, you'd probably use something like proof of authority, and it would be the Swedish Land Registry. But actually you can triangulate proof of authority. So you could say, if the Swedish Land Registry say yes, if the financer says yes, and if an external third party says yes, that's it. But there's many ways you can develop that. But that's one of the interesting, it's a really good question, because the blockchain technology itself is actually quite easy and quite simple. It's the governance, the rules, the framework. So when Alexandra spoke earlier on, one of the key messages from the slides was it's a multidisciplinary approach. It's the exact same with blockchain. Going in there with just technologists, you're wasting your time. You need everyone. You need people who understand industry. You need people who understand the value chain, the risk, the tax, the compliance, everything that goes with it. And I suppose that's where, as a firm, I suppose we have an advantage in that we have kind of all those people under our roof. But that is a key one. Yeah.
Emma Hayes, Digital Build Consultants. Thank you for explaining blockchain. I do feel more informed now. I am still a little confused by the whole thing. So my question is about private blockchain and its application. So you cited the example where the construction industry could have a private blockchain.
Yeah.
Could that be narrowed down to a project having private blockchain? And would that help with procurement?
Yeah, so you could have a private blockchain. So private blockchains, the smallest you can really go is, I would say, to be anyway effective, is 3 nodes. So that could be consultants, project consultants, engineers, architect, or maybe the actual contractor itself. So you could have 3, right? So you could do it at a project level. As you scale, it gets a little bigger. But to be effective, that's what we've seen. How the private blockchain started is interesting. It was started by an organization primarily called R3. R3 was set up as a response by the banking industry to everything that was happening in the Bitcoin and the Ethereum world. Why did they set up their own private club? Because they're afraid of being disintermediated. That was the main reason. I think the more interesting question in the future around private blockchains is, are they going to be permitted by the European treaty? If you think about competition law, it is a barrier to entry. Now, in a private project context, it's fine because you've gone through the tendering process, you've gone through all the mechanics, you've selected your vendors. But could you do it for the preamble as well? Yeah, you could. You could have a private blockchain for the actual scoping of the project and for the feasibility and for the tendering process. And then whoever's selected then stays on the blockchain. The others are kicked off and they start using that as the network between them. The other thing you can have is you can have what's called a hybrid. So you can have a private blockchain that interacts with a public blockchain. So we're starting to see this now in the trading world. Things are being done on a daily basis. It's like very quick private blockchains, because the public blockchains aren't as quick, there's lag in them because of the consensus being so chunky. So you can run all your transactions on the private blockchain, and then at the end of the day kick out of position, almost like a disaster recovery mechanism to the public blockchain, but it keeps the information intact and it gives you that disaster recovery. Hope that answers the, yeah.
Okay,
Do you see a
thanks, Cillian.
time where contracts would be set up on a blockchain and where an event on site, for instance, the final inspection
Yeah.
triggers payment
Yeah, absolutely.
of all the subcontractors?
I'll give you a really good
instantly,
example.
like-
I'll give you a really cool example from the world today of the use of smart contracts. There is an organization in France, I just can't remember the name off the top of my head, but they've developed a relationship with Charles de Gaulle Airport. You walk into Charles de Gaulle Airport now, you can buy an insurance product, I think it's €10. And you go in, you download this blockchain app, you don't even realize it's blockchain, you go in, and it's a €10 bet basically. If a flight is delayed by more than 4 hours, they'll give you a payout of €100, right? But there's a tenner, so you're paying a tenner. So what do? They gamify the situation. After an hour, the plane's delayed, we'll give you back your €10. After 2 hours, okay, we'll give you 20 quid. After 3 hours, maybe €40. After 3 hours and 50 minutes, we'll give you 70. So they're trying to minimize the loss, but what are they doing? They're gamifying. So you're there in Charles de Gaulle, you're there on a 4-hour delay, right? Or you know, whatever. You're coming up to 3 hours 50, and instead of saying, I wish this fucking plane would take off and let's get going, you're thinking, geez, you know what, wouldn't it be great now if I get another 10 minutes and I'll have €100 in my back pocket. But it changes the complete customer experience, the customer dynamic. So we are seeing those things coming already, yeah, and they're being developed.
Thanks, Cillian. Okay, one last question and then we must move on.
Right,
Okay,
good.
thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was really interesting. I suppose my two comments are just adding on top of what you said in relation to last two questions. I suppose the benefit of a blockchain is the bigger it is and the more people who participate in it, the better value you get out of it and the more secure it is. And yes, I think it's an interesting way to look at it because you have to start off with everything that's small. So building a small consortium and construction around the project could be interesting, but really a project is one, contains many players and many actors because the supply chain and construction is so large, is so massive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can, as you say, you can create any size of blockchain once it's probably more than 3. And as long as those 3 people trust each other,
Yeah.
to a degree, the bigger it gets, the less you need to trust the individual players. That's just the nature of blockchain.
Yeah.
And on the payments end of things, people always ask the question about automated payments in construction. And as Alan was saying, I think automating payments in construction is a long way away. It is a good idea, it's a nice idea,
Yeah.
but there's lots of problems in construction need to be solved culturally
Yeah.
to allow technology then to start automating payment systems.
Yeah. The other thing, just maybe one final thought for me is just to say this as well. It's actually counterintuitive. You think the bigger a network it gets and the more decentralized the network gets, the riskier it is. It's actually the inverse. The bigger it gets, the bigger a blockchain network gets, the more replication of the nodes, the more sharing of the ledger, the safer, the stronger, and the more impenetrable it gets. So that's it. So thanks for your
Okay,
time,
thanks
folks.
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.